right, and there you have it. Some great words from Ronnie Haj, one of the founders of Founder Connects. As mentioned, it is a community of founders. It is a group where founders come together, connect, chat, share insights, ask questions, and help each other out. So if you're interested, please do check out their LinkedIn page. Do reach out to the guys. It's such an amazing community of some awesome people out there. And I'm privileged to be one of those people, which is a lot of fun. Honestly, it is worth your time. So definitely do check them out. Reach out to Ronnie or go to founderconnects.com and you can get started on your own journey. And as promised, for those of you that did take a minute to let us know who you guys are, welcome everybody. I will give you guys some quick shout outs. We've got Ali, who's about to launch a startup called Crispers. I would assume that's how it's pronounced, KRSPERS.com. And we got Sandra, founder of Drizzle, joining us from Dubai. And we have Shazeen, founder of Nook, a startup based out of Riyadh, Saudi. Welcome everybody to Big Stories. So to get the show on the road, without further ado, I am excited to introduce this man to you guys. We go way back, and in the preparation for the session, I was reflecting back on the good old days. Personally, I grew up in Sharjah. I would assume some countries in the GCC have some similarities. I started a business called Dukkan because that had a special place in my heart. A lot of sentimental values. For those that remember, you would either call them or run downstairs to the shop, grab a bag of whatever you want. You could either pay for it, or you could be like, for those that speak Arabic, sajil hisab, which means credit it to my account. And they pull out these old cigarette carton boxes, flip it in, rip it up, and use that to create a list of all the people that owe the money and all the orders that have gone out. And it was quite nostalgic. And on that note, this man here is part of a team that has digitized this entire experience and simplified it and brought it to your phone. Cosmin is one of the people behind the amazing startup Instashop. We've got a very fun session that we would like to chat with you guys about. As we go through, if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll do my best to try and squeeze it into the session. And sometimes I might have the question already set up, so it could be an easy flow. So, Cosmin, my man, it's good to see you again.
And good to see you as well, Omar. And thank you, Founder Connects, for setting this up. And yeah, it's been like almost 4 years since I left Dubai. So I'm not physically in Dubai right now. I'm based in Romania, in Bucharest. But yeah, when you were talking about supermarkets, I was getting flashbacks of that was my day-to-day in Instashop. So yeah.
I was about to say it could either be PTSD or fond memories or both. I'm gonna go with both.
A combination of both. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's awesome to see you, man. And I'm so happy we're doing this. I've known you before Instashop. I mean, we were still back in the day, university students. So not since the last time I met you, but since Founder Connects, since Instashop, came about. Tell us a little bit about your story. How did that come about? Introduce us to your journey. Give us a quick overview, and we'll dive deep into the questions right after.
Yeah, well, I was born in Romania. I came to Dubai in 2008. I was 18 years old because my parents moved. We moved with the whole family, and I joined the AUD. That's where we met, and that's where eventually I met my wife as well. So like a lot of things connected with AUD for me. I right after AUD, I worked for 1 year in like a graduate program in Philips. And then I decided like, okay, it's time for me to go out, move out of Dubai. I went for a master's in Madrid for 2 years in IE Business School. And actually that's where I kind of realized that, okay, for me, it's very important to work in startups. I felt like I can have more of an impact on the world. And I mean, it wasn't that big of a vision, but it was more for me. I felt like I can have more impact if I work in startups than in big multinationals. And then I worked in a startup right before Instashop with the same founder from Instashop, and that failed. Like every journey, like Ronnie was saying as well, like you need to have a fail before you get it right. Not always. Hopefully, some people get it from the first. And then the team, which was I think 3 or 4 people at the time, in the summer of 2015, moved to the idea of creating Instashop, and then the whole Instashop journey up to 2020, when it was the exit to Delivery Hero for 360 million. And that's when I decided that I want to leave Dubai again. It was like 11 years in total, and it was the pandemic, and I was having a small child at the time. I wanted to focus more on the family. So since then I moved back to Romania, and in the past 3 years I'm mainly focused as an angel investor, but with a focus on startups that are more sustainable or have an impact on society. So it's not only for profit, because I feel like there's a more responsibility on all of us to try to make the world a bit better. And that's where I am today. So now let's deep dive into whatever aspect you want.
All right, sweet. Let's do that. So early, when you were talking, something interesting stood out. You're talking about this idea of impact, and that's what, in some ways, drew you to startups. Uh, how did you connect those two dots? What did that mean to you, and what is impact by your definition in this case?
Well, it was this energy that I had coming out of university, which I think almost not every person, but at least someone that wants to achieve something or has a certain drive in life has it. And I think it actually helped me very well that I worked for 1 year in a multinational to realize that, okay, this energy and speed that I have and mindset and everything is not being matched, at least by that particular multinational. I'm not saying they're all the same. And I felt like I want to change the world, that feeling when you're like between 16 and 25
Yep.
until life
Yep.
hits you and you realize, okay, it's harder than you think. So yeah, I felt like I can't really change the world by being a tiny piece in a big mechanism, and no one's really taking you serious and stuff like that. And with the help of IE, where I met and I surrounded myself with a lot of kind of wannabe entrepreneurs or already entrepreneurs, then I got into that mindset to realize, like, okay, this is doable. It's not something you only read in articles or see on TV. When you sit next to a person that's been doing this, you realize it's just about starting and going through the hardship of it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what happened, and the whole idea of like trying to work in startups to have an impact. But at the time it wasn't necessarily an impact in terms of I want to make the world a better place and I want to make it more sustainable. At the time it just felt for me that I'm not being taken serious as an individual.
Mhm. I totally empathize with that. I mean, there is some sense of delusion that we have at a certain age. We're like, you know what? I want to build something that matters, something that's a little bit better. And what I love about the spectrum is that on the far end is like you don't want to go Kanye, right? Somewhere, somewhere a little before that, where it's like, I want to take this bet on, right? And this idea of betting on yourself, where you're like, all right, let's go. I'm, sink or swim. I'm gonna figure something out here and figure out how to do it. So that's pretty cool, man. I like that journey. What was your upbringing like? Did that have an effect on not only how you saw the world, but how you saw these challenges?
Yeah, I think it always does. For me, I mean, overall was positive. Like I grew up in a happy family, happy childhood. It was very interesting, and I realized that I went on a beautiful spectrum of when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time, like around maybe 4 months a year, at my grandparents, without my parents, just my grandparents. And my grandparents are literally in a village. But when I say village, it means it only had electricity, like no TV, no internet, no running water, no, like really remote.
Wow.
And there are a few elements, like just to put a picture, like for example, they didn't have a trash bin. Why they didn't have a trash bin? Because there was no trash. Because you would eat what was being produced in the farm, like from animals to vegetables to fruits, and everything that was kind of waste will go back to the animals, as in terms of compost or whatever. So there was no plastic. There was no, because you wouldn't buy anything from the supermarket. You would just bake your bread. Everything was done.
Right.
So I went growing up from that to what I think is the opposite of the spectrum, which is a place like Dubai. I mean, I spent 11 years there. A place like Dubai, which is probably one of the most developed cities in the world, where in the desert you manage to create a place. So I kind of went through the whole spectrum, and for me, that really gave me a perspective on life, on understanding, okay, where should we be as humanity that it makes sense for all of us. And I think it has to be a combination of understanding both of them. And unfortunately, the new generations that don't really understand what agriculture means and living in the countryside and stuff like that, they don't even know how an animal looks like besides what they saw on Animal Planet or whatever. And they don't know
Right.
how food is being produced, and they don't know the quality of food and what does that mean. So that had an impact on me on understanding sustainability and impact and how lifestyle should be and where I'm trying to focus right now. Um, and yeah, I think that's one of the most important thing I want to mention from there. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, just growing up in Romania, it's an interesting place, childhood, and and then in Dubai, where it helped me a lot, Dubai, in understanding the world because of all the different cultures and nationalities that you have, and opening your eyes on, okay, we're basically all the same. We all want the same things, and we just want peace, love, and to be happy. So yeah. I feel
Dude, I
like it's
love
moving
that.
this podcast into like a different vibe.
No, honestly, I love that, and I think those vibes are necessary to have, because this agricultural upbringing is super fascinating to me, because you really did. You went to a polar opposite, you know, from one end of the spectrum of farming, not having any trash because things become that are not eaten get turned into compost or become animal feed, right? And it's such a beautiful experience to have, that getting dirt under your nails type upbringing. So with that experience, and then doing university in Dubai, how did that translate to what you didn't have in this case, aka supermarkets and a digital one? How did the idea of Instashop come about?
Well, that's an easy question to answer because it didn't come from me. So, so that actually came from the founder of Instashop. I was working with him at the time in Vound, which was a startup that we were working together right before Instashop. And he came up with the idea, and we moved the team, which was 3 people at the time. And that's when I went back to Dubai. It came at a time where we were struggling in the previous project. We were running out of money. We were running out of cash. It was obvious that the end is coming. So it was just a question of, okay, what do we do with the last resources that we have? We realized that we can't pivot anymore this project, and he came with the idea of like, okay, I think he was telling me that he saw an article about online grocery picking up in the US and stuff like that. So that's how he came up with the idea. But what's interesting is that at the time there was already one application live doing exactly the same thing in Dubai when we launched, and another one that was being launched more or less at the same time as us. So it wasn't like so innovative that we were the first in the market and I don't know what. And there's a lot to discuss there because just in the 6 years that I was there, um, when I tell this story is that we were, the Instashop color, orange, pink, red color type. And then there were 20 other applications that were just a different color. Basically doing the same, at least at the beginning. You click an item, goes to your basket, you get it at your doorstep. And the reason why we were the only ones that managed to succeed in having such an exit and the rest died, besides one more that had a much, much smaller exit, um, is basically for me, and my idea is the team, the founding team, and the work that they put into it. Because otherwise, we are very similar as a business model, and there was not much differentiator there.
Hmm.
So yeah, that kind
So
of
that leads
answers your
okay, so
question.
that leads me to a follow up here. So technically that was somewhat of a pivot, right? You guys were like, the startup situation is not working out, right? We got to try and figure something completely different and a whole new different business model in a different industry and space. Um, so in this case, you said you were three, and the two of you guys, so five in total.
No, three in total.
Okay.
It was three people. Yeah,
Oh, three
yeah,
in total. Okay, it was
three in
just the three
total.
of you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Okay, so in the previous uh startup before the pivot, I'm assuming it was a different industry. Was it bootstrapped, or did you guys go about getting funding for it as well?
No, that was bootstrapped, and it was a completely different industry. It was like a social network for your voice. And yeah, it was very hard to pick up because you had the whole network effect of having the, just like on Instagram, having the guys producing the content and having the followers. So it's very hard to do that without actual, strong marketing budget and stuff like that. So we never managed to pick that off the ground, and yeah, then the whole Instashop idea came to to
Oh,
to
okay,
be realized.
got it. So okay, and so you guys pivoted that, and you guys switched it up to Instashop. Now, in that journey, how did you go about building that? What were the early days experience was like? How'd you guys get it off the ground? Considering there was somebody else that started something similar, another business was coming into the same space. How did you guys go about standing out, especially in those early days, to keep going?
I mean, if I remember correctly, the feeling, it was a lot of panic at the time, and worry
Mm.
and stress and stuff like that. But we started basically with one supermarket in Dubai Marina, right across the street from. It was in Torch Tower, the one that keeps going on fire, unfortunately. And
And it's not a laughing matter. I'm sorry. It's just
no,
I
it's
did
not
not
obviously, but
I
it's just
just didn't
ironic that
expect that. Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't expect that to be where location.
And that was the first supermarket that we signed. And the idea is that we used to look at it in a very, very granular way and very small. So we are like, okay, we have this supermarket, we have a basic app that was developed, I think, in 10 days, that has some buttons, and the items go to your basket and checkout. That's it. It was a very easy flow, about three clicks. And we were like, we need to get people to order. We already knew that the model exists because people used to use the phone call to call the grocery downstairs for a kg of tomatoes or whatever. So we're like, okay, how do we get those people? So it was basically a marketing issue, like how do we get those people? And we saw it very localized. Like we didn't think Facebook, we didn't think anything. We're like, okay, these people, these 6 buildings around here, if obviously you're aware of Dubai Marina, those huge buildings around that area. And we basically did t-shirts, we had leaflets, and we were just on the ground giving leaflets to people, explaining to them, oh, this is a new thing, please try it, please try it. And those were the early days. And I remember getting an order every day at the beginning, then getting an order every 6 hours, getting an order every 3 hours. And it was like this excitement of like, wow, I can't believe that someone's actually using our product. It was like surreal. And the whole thing, like, I think we stayed in that kind of segment for like, I think 2 or 3 good months of like just building that supermarket and understanding the business model. So we saw it very small, not like, oh, let's launch Dubai, let's do that, let's do this.
Okay, got it. Give me a second. Need to pause recording for a moment just to make a quick adjustment to my audio. Apparently, my voice is low. Small. We're like, you know what? Let's get started in the marina because, and I understand the logic, right? Because if you get one grocery store, a supermarket in that space, you've got the few buildings around it. Let's hand out leaflets. Let's talk to people, rock our branded shirts, and educate as much as we can in terms of footfall that's around you, right? And that was the first early stages with a very simple version of the app. Okay, so as that was happening, where did you guys see this going, and how did you eventually get into putting some nitros into it?
I mean, there were moments where the thing with like being an entrepreneur is that there's like this very strong daily roller coaster where you have a day where things are going well and you go like, wow, okay, we're gonna take over the world, we're gonna launch this in 6 countries in the next 3 months. And then days where you go like, whoa, okay, this is really hard. How are you gonna what are we going to do next, you know? So like very complete, very different feelings. But kind of what we realize is that we're like, okay, let's try to continue focusing on what works and keep things simple, you know? So we realized like, okay, we launched a shop. There were 6 tall buildings around it. We managed to make it work. We reached, I think, around 20, 30, 40 orders per day. And we're like, okay, let's move to the next step. And we're like, let's just replicate what we did good because it already worked. So we did exactly that. We went to the next supermarket and we're like, let's do the same thing. Leaflets, t-shirts. We basically did that, I think, for the first kind of year and a bit. Just that, like one supermarket at a time, very localized area. And I think later on we started doing like, you know, Dubai size marketing and stuff like that. So it was basically that, taking it in a very localized matter, doing a lot of, we used to call it field marketing. And then later on we realized, okay, now is the step to, for example, talk with like supermarket chains, you know, and then try to get one of the big players in, because then you can expand geographically, you know, marketing, importance, visibility, branding and stuff. And that's when we kind of realized that, okay, this is about scaling up and how can we do that much faster.
Got it. Yeah. I love that sentiment because I think it takes me back to, I think this was like a hip hop thing, but I think the same applies to sports as it does to business or any competitive field, if you will. There's a logic of first you take over your little neighborhood, and then you take over the little town or the district you're in. Then you take over the city, you take over the country, right? So you kind of let it ripple in pieces in any competitive narrative until you start competing at a global space, right? And I love that because you have to be that granular at the early days. You got to be that sort of really magnifying glass, focusing on one thing, proving concept, and testing it out on the next and the next and the next, and you kind of go accordingly. So from that, when did you guys feel like, okay, we need to go to investors and get some cash coming in? How did that part start?
That was actually quite early on because you're still here?
Yeah, sorry, I had a bit of a glitch here. All right.
Yeah, like, that was quite early on, like at the end of May, when the founder came and said, okay, like, you know, let's pivot to Instashop. We were kind of low on cash already by then, so the need of investors was already there. We're lucky in a way, but you know, luck you do it with your own hands. That during Found, there was an investor that was very interested in the team and the vibe of the team, but he was not so sure about the product. So when we came and we said, okay, look, this is Instashop, and this is what we want to do, he was like, okay, in this I want to invest. So kind of very early on, I think after maybe 3 or 4 weeks of Instashop, we went to this investor, which connected us with another kind of VC, and said like, okay, you know, we're happy with the results and what's happening, and we'll give you guys some money. I don't remember exactly how much it was. I think it was somewhere between 50 to 200K. I don't remember exactly, but somewhere there, like kind of a seed. Yeah, kind of a seed round. That person ended up creating a VC, which is called Venture Friends now. And it's a very, very good VC from Greece, but they're kind of globally right now. And the other VC was Jabal Internet Group, which is one of the ones that invested in Souk and stuff like that. So these were kind of the two investors and the ones that we kind of stuck with them up to the end. So we didn't have any other. So it was quite early on for us that it was like after 3 to 4 weeks, we managed to get some money.
Okay, I like that. And when you got that money, what did you guys do with it? Because obviously we know a lot of people are still, they haven't hit that stage just yet, but it's part of the journey. So what was done with that early investment?
I mean, we are very, and I give that this credit definitely to the founder, to John. We're very stingy, let's say, with money. So very, very careful in terms of everything. We had a detailed budget for the next few months. We are always looking into it and stuff like that. And we were very careful, for example, with salaries. Like, like our salaries were like so little that it used to like feel weird when I talk to my friends that used to work in Google, and I used to like sleep in a, like, for example, for the first 7 months I had to stay in Dubai Marina because I had to be very close to the supermarket, because I used to, like, in the morning go to meetings and then in the afternoon deliver grocery orders myself to customers, because we had a big volume of orders and I want to see what's happening with the business. So we're that type of founders, like really involved. So I had to be in Dubai Marina, and because I couldn't afford it on my, yeah, at the time I had 8,000 dirhams. Now it's even more shit, 8,000, because, like, 8,000 means nothing now, but even it was nothing. And it was very hard to find housing in Dubai Marina, and I used to stay in a maid's room in, I think it was called Tamani Hotel, right, like at the traffic light, Dubai Marina.
Yeah.
And I was in a maid's room that was literally 2 meters by like 1.9. Like my door will hit the bed, and I had no windows. So like I used to wake up with like kind of this lamp, like just to realize like it's day outside, because I had no idea. And I
Wow.
was there for like 7 months, and then I will talk with my friends that were like in Google or Facebook or whatever, because the master's program that we did in Madrid was on digital business. So a lot of my classmates ended up in these big multinationals, tech startups. And then they were like, my salary is $5,000 and I don't know. And I was like, okay, I'm trying to survive on on bits and pieces. So that was the vibe. Like we were very willing to kind of sacrifice and like look into the idea that, okay, we know why we're here for. We're not here to have fancy dinners and I don't know what. And to be honest, it was like that for like around 3 years. We used to work every weekend, like 7 days a week, non-stop the whole year. I don't remember going out in the first like 2.5 years, like any fancy dinner or anything. It was just the idea that we have a purpose. This is it. We're doing this and whatever it takes. So maybe that's what made the difference between us and the rest.
Yeah. Now, honestly, I love that. And how important is to have that kind of grit? Because here's the thing, I think it is grit, it also is a sense of resilience and a sense of like, yo, I'm gonna bet on myself. Like we're all in, right? Like, between a rock and a hard place, we gotta go now. And not many founders would go down and like, manage deliveries themselves or do these things on their own. How important is that, do you feel like, is to the success, like how important is that in relation to the success of the business long term?
In our case, I think that's what made the difference. So us compared to the other 20 startups that were basically doing the same, that's what made the difference. Obviously, the 20 startups, a few of them came after we were in the market for 3 years, so we were already very strong, so it was hard for them to compete with us. That's a different story. But at least with the early ones, the first 5, 10 competitors, I think that made the difference. Like us, the founders, being in the supermarkets, working 7 days a week, fixing problems, being there, understanding the customer and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, we are all an app that you click some items and you get them delivered. So it was a bit hard to be very different in the market, at least at the core level. Obviously, you will have different features and you will try to have better customer service and stuff like that. But I don't think this necessarily applies to every single startup. I mean, it depends on the startup. If you're in a very B2C, red ocean competitive market, I think you need to have that. Otherwise, for sure, someone else will have it and you will miss out and you will eventually, unfortunately, die from a startup point of view. But there are other industries where I've seen many other, founders and stuff where they're smart enough or lucky enough to be in a more of a blue ocean. So then they don't have much competition. They can enjoy going to a lot of events, enjoying life, go to sleep at a reasonable hour and spend time with their kids. So you can do that as well. You just need to really look into which industry you are or when you launch your project to understand better what type of project is this going to be. And the other problem for us is that it was a 24-hour kind of business. So we used to get, important orders at 11:30 p.m. There was nothing we could do, It's not like you had to do something about it. And in the first few months, we were everything: customer service, delivery, customer support, so stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, real quick before we go to on to the next one, if you could explain just blue ocean and red ocean and the differences. I love that you said them. I started smiling when I heard it because I think it's such an important piece of knowledge when I first came across the book. So, if you could share a little bit, what is blue ocean? What is red ocean? What's the difference?
Yeah, so a red ocean means basically an industry, the direct industry and the direct competitors for your business and your business model, where you have a lot of them, and it's sometimes even hard to differentiate yourself. So that means it becomes a red ocean in the idea that it's a bloodly like fight against each other on pricing, on customer service, on whatever. Blue ocean is the idea that you're alone in an industry, sailing, no one to bother you. It's just about you kind of satisfying the need of the customer, but no one has to come and give a better offer or do something to bother you. So these are very important, and I noticed that usually B2C, consumer products like these type of apps, stuff like that, they're usually um, red ocean. And the weird thing is that at least now with the maturity of going through a project like that and being an investor, I realize sometimes there's like a lot of interesting projects that can be done in B2B or in a lot of other industry where there's not many ideas. But the problem is that a lot of people get attracted to the B2C beautiful apps. They go like, oh, I want to do an Uber because, look, Uber, it's a unicorn. I want to do an Instashop because, look, Instashop did the amazing exit. And I feel like, for example, with those startups, 20 startups that came along the way, that was the feeling, There were people that were like, okay, yeah, look, this is a nice idea. They're doing great. Let me do it as well.
Yeah,
But it might have been smarter for those founders, for example, to use their money and time and resources into a different project. So that time, now, for the sake of our discussion, that we're maybe discussing with people that are looking, that are, founders or future founders, is that it's quite important to understand in which industry you are and how hard is it going to be from a competition point of view, and see if it's really worth it. If it's, maybe rethink the whole plan and go somewhere else
yeah, that's true.
with the money and the time you have.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then in most cases, like I'm a big fan of having competition. At the very least, somebody else exists out there that might have done something similar, is doing something in this space, because it lets me know I'm onto something. Because if somebody else is working on something, there's indications from the market. Because if they can exist, they can succeed, then there is a hunger for something that can come in, even if you're 10% better, right? There's always an opportunity there. Okay, cool. Tell me, what were some of the most turbulent times for you guys throughout this journey? I mean, there's no business that is not flawed with business issues that it goes through. Obviously, startups are no different.
Yeah, we had a lot of those, from the typical ones of issues with technologies, and sometimes realizing after 2 or 3 hours that servers are not working, panicking, not understanding what's happening. And sometimes I remember we had a big glitch that took, I think, 4 or 5 hours, which was like a nightmare. We thought that this is it, we died.
Yeah,
And so from those ones to the reality of the stress and issue of like actually running a startup and running out of money. So there was a moment where we did not get the next financing round, and we were very low on money, and we already had a team of, I think, around 20 to 30 people. So that meant salaries and things like that. So we reached to a moment where like, okay, we can't pay salaries for the next 2 to 3 months. And there, what we did is that we completely stopped paying salaries to the management team because it was easier to discuss with them and understand the situation, which that was like, I think, around 8 to 9 people. So we did whatever sacrifice we could do to try to survive those periods. And then the other ones, which was like with competition, which, the news that, this big retail group is launching their own app and they have so much money, and oh my God, what's going to happen to us? And I don't know what. And there, for example, it used to be the feeling of scared, of like, oh, okay, this is happening. And then realizing like, we should just continue doing what we've been doing. Like, there's a reason why customers choose us. And if we continue doing our hard work and what we've been doing so far, we should be okay in the end. And obviously it's easy now to talk in retrospective,
yeah.
but that was kind of the idea.
All right, I got a couple of questions on this one. So, how did you go about telling staff that you're not going to be able to pay them salaries and getting them to sort of still bet on your dream and stick around with you guys?
Yeah, that's a big one and goes in the category of building the team and hiring the right people. And before I answer that question, I actually remember a lot of people that was a mismatch of understanding the opportunity. So there were people at the beginning that were kind of not understanding that, hey, this is a startup and I'm working for something like this. They used to be very like, oh, okay, this is too hard, this is too not great paid and stuff like that. So you really need to find a team that is on board with what's happening and really understands. We found that, especially the management team. I think we had a top-notch management team, like the core of the team, the founding team, and it was quite easy to talk with them. With those 9 people, it was easy because we used to kind of be very active into being one group. So the founder and let's say the other 7-8 people from the founding team, we were very close. Every decision was being discussed and stuff like that. But at least at the beginning of the project, it used to be like that, and it was understandable. Like we were there. It wasn't coming as a shock. Like, oh my God, I don't have a salary next month. We knew what's happening. We knew that, and it was this feeling that we knew that it's just a temporary financial thing. Like we knew the project is working. We knew that we're getting more orders. Everything's going well. It's just the investors are taking more time or whatever. We can't convince the investors at a certain valuation and stuff like that. So it was hard, but it was a feeling of like we understand what's happening and it's going to be okay. But we lost some people in that, in those periods as well.
So just to check, you said so their concerns or the delays were from the founders, from the investors. Was this during one of the early series after you guys you went back to ask for extra cash from investors?
Yeah, I think it was the next round after the seed round. I think there was a bit of a delays in kind of finalizing the deal in a way, because with the investors, obviously everyone wants to have the best deal on their side, and it's a back and forth negotiation. And it was a combination of us, not reducing the engines in terms of marketing and stuff like that, because that will show on the market, on the monthly reports. So it's thin decisions of like understanding how much money should we spend. Okay, we're going to run out of money, but we can't really shut down marketing. That's going to look back on our report for the investors. The investor will start asking questions. So there's a lot to juggle out there. But one of the things that I do right now, for example, to the founders where I invest as an angel investor, is that I always have a 6 months mark where, I always ask them, okay, I need you to have your finances in place, in the idea that you need to have a schedule of what's your expenses for the next at least 6 months to 12 months. And when you reach to the moment that 6 months from now you run out of cash, you need to ring the bells and something has to happen. So because I've seen actually in the past 3 years a few startups that they were good as a business model, so they were working, everything was fine, but they died because of cash flow issues, which is obviously an obvious one. Like, why did your company die? Well, we ran out of money, obviously, but there's a lot of startups that die because they couldn't prove the business model, because they couldn't really get traction and stuff like that. That's one problem. But there's others that prove the business concept is working well, but they ran out of cash. They couldn't raise the next round. Everything was going well, and they ran out of cash. Salaries came and they had to fire, and then they ended up, okay, what do we do? So that's unfortunate, and you always need to be aware.
So sorry, so you're saying is to have a minimum of 6 to 12 months of financial runway at any given point, and as you get closer, you ring the doorbell, or?
No, 12 months plan. You should always be aware of how much you spend every month, and to be like, okay, I have this much in the bank account, this much I spend. So that means if things go like this, I have 12 months worth of money. And to ring the bell at 6 months, because what's happening is that if you ring the bell at 6 months, you go like, okay, I need to do another round. You're going to start preparing the pitch and everything and send emails. It's going to take you 1 to 2 months to have some really good meetings, let's say 3 months. And then by the moment you find a VC or someone willing to invest, they're going to take weeks, if not a month, to do due diligence, and then another 2 to 3 weeks to sign the paper, and then another 2 weeks to give you the money. So in total, that's like around 3 months, just from the moment that someone told you, like, we're quite interested. So that's a problem, because in the life of a startup, 2 months without cash means you might, you know. So it's
Yeah.
very tricky to be aware of these timelines.
Okay. So you've been on that the side of the fence of a startup and like, hey, give us some money. We're working on something super cool. And now you're on the other side of the fence where you are an investor as well. You're so in that on both those sides, I think because you have those perspectives, it'll be good to understand what goes through the due diligence process, right? There's obviously about finance, the business model, what have you, but I think you already bought into the business. You're like, great, you got to due diligence, right? How does that go? How do you protect yourself while sort of opening your books to a potential investor as well, right? Because you want to show some, but maybe you got a secret sauce you're going to need to hold on to. So how does that process go from both perspectives?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very tricky one. We did face something similar in Instashop as well, with one of the big retailers, where they were like in a way very interested in us, and at one point they kind of hinted that they want to buy us quite early on, and then we realized like, okay, they might not necessarily want to buy us, they might just want to know what we're
Yeah,
doing and how we're doing it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's very tricky. I think the important thing is about building trust, and it's always like I saw a lot of founders do that now, and I think it's a great idea to try to always be in contact with a few VCs or angel investors that you really believe in and they kind of know you. To just talk like, look, in 3 months I'm launching this project, stuff like that. Share something about the idea. And I'm like you said about competition, like I'm also very relaxed when it comes to, like, I'm now worried about sharing a PDF because, oh my God, they're gonna steal my idea. But I did see instances even in our region in our industry where between different competitors, you will end up getting the information because of some, VCs and stuff. So that's obviously a bit more dangerous. If you're in an industry where you have two, three competitors at the same level as you might end up with your deck on their email. So
yeah,
that you need to be a bit careful. But I think it's all about your gut feeling, getting to know the people, and see if they're actually interested and stuff like that. There's also some legal stuff where you can do like a term sheet and sign a sort of NDA. At least you feel
yeah,
like legally you're protected, and stuff like that. And it's the same from an investor side. Like, you need to build trust with the people to be comfortable with
mm,
you to share their decks and really go into the details and stuff like that.
great. So it's building rapport and developing trust is really the main thing here because yes, contracts and having, things printed out and signed and stamped is a good to have, but that person's going to invest in your business, bro. Like, right? So it's like, unless we like each other, this could blow up in both our faces. It could become quite an issue later down the line. So, at the very least, let's start on a happy note, right? Let's build trust and rapport together.
Yeah,
An
and it's
interesting
important. So
question.
I just wanted to add one thing there. Like,
Hmm.
it's important because obviously, at the beginning, you're a bit desperate in a way, and you're like, any money will do. Just anyone that's giving me 50K, 100K, I'll
Right.
take it. But in reality, it's not like that. Like, you need to be a bit patient, obviously depending on the situation, where you are, what industry, whatever. But ideal would be to be a bit aware that there is a big difference between who's investing in you. Because you can have an investor that can put the shoulder in and can actually help you besides the money and the cash, can help you by opening doors and be there with you and, help you with resources besides whatever. And can be an investor that can actually be a trouble for you, can
Mhm.
invest and then maybe start sharing your data with someone else or whatever has other interest, or might just not help you at all in opening other doors. And then, yeah, it's some cash,
Yeah.
but a bit of a headache. Or maybe they're very strict in due diligence, in every month report this, do that, do this. So it's very tricky also who you get money from.
Yeah. No, most definitely. I think. Do you remember back in the day when we were in university, this restaurant Naked Pizza that opened up at the time? Right? And I remember the founders came to campus and they were giving a talk, so I went to check it out. And he said something really interesting at the time on VCs and investments. They had to fight to be so patient to wait for an investment from Mark Cuban. They kept hitting him up on Twitter. They kept sending him emails, and in his mind, and this is before your Shark Tank days, right? But at the time, it was smart. He's like, no, no, this guy's a brand. He's the basketball guy at the time, right? He was known as the basketball dude. But having that, there's a strategic partnership there because as soon as they did that and they finally locked in a deal with him, the news started writing about it. Like, why does Mark Cuban, the basketball dude, is interested in this pizza place, right? So, and I thought that was a very interesting approach as well. Like, really looking for the people that not only you could vibe with, but there's a relationship, the pros and cons can be worked out here, and also has the strategic addition that they could bring to the table beyond just here's my money, you know? So something to just keep in mind.
Yeah, and that
Uh,
goes both ways because me as an investor, if someone really pushes for the span of 6 months and they, I can see them, they're really passionate. It shows me a lot of things about that founder, and I understand that, okay, he really wants to work together. We can have a few meetings irrespective of the project. So that will be an ideal type of relationship, and I think people should try to aim for that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people that go like, oh, I have a list of 200 VCs. Let me just boom, email all of them. We'll see what I catch. That can work, but it would be better if you try to target what makes sense for you and your industry.
yeah, I completely agree. Um, Sandra sent a very interesting question earlier. So she was asking about would the VCs give all the money up front? She's heard some talks about this before about VCs giving money up front. Is that something? Have you seen or heard about that before?
Um, Upfront, the due diligence and stuff, no.
Yeah.
Or at least I haven't heard. So the due
Yeah.
diligence and everything has to happen as far as unless obviously it's an existing investor and then you're asking for the second round. But that's an existing investor that knows your business, been following up every month, and you have documents signed with him. About tranches, yeah, that sometimes it happens with some targets. Go like, okay, I give you, part of the money now, and then in 6 months you reach these targets, I release the other part of the money. That's something I do as an angel investor. But I usually do it within like a short period, like 3 months, because I invest very early on. So 3 months is the startup to the beginning. Um, and yeah, I wanted to add another point there, but I don't remember now. Um, yeah,
So
and
that's about
then
transfer.
yeah, that's about it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So usually happens where if the same VC has already invested in you before, and they're open to it, or in tranches where, as you said in your case, it's like, every 3 months, because you're an angel investor, you come in super early, you give them a window of 3 months to meet certain targets, and then you invest the rest.
Yeah, and then there are usually kind of two types of VCs. Like there's some that are dedicated for seed rounds, and they only do seed rounds, and they do a seed round, and they can open a door for another VC that does round A or whatever, or they go like, this is it. I can't help you go to the next fish. Then there are the other VCs that do seed round with knowing that they will do a follow up. So they do seed round, round A, and maybe even later on. So in their budgets, they usually have allocated some money to go like, okay, whatever startup from our portfolio grows, we're going to allocate some money. And those are
Yeah.
great because obviously it becomes like a partner for you. So you just have to keep them updated and say, guys, in 6 months, we're growing. It seems like we're reaching the targets. We're going to need this much money. Everything, it's easy,
Yeah.
no need for complications. So.
Got it. All right, sweet. So moving forward, actually, sorry, before that, there are some times I think when certain VCs will come in and sort of tell you that, hey, you know what? If you get that big fish, I will invest X amount. So you got to get this other investor first, or get somebody to pay X amount, and I will come in and cover this, right? So they kind of throw the onus back on you to find somebody else.
Always there, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a chicken and egg thing. Like, you get that, we come in, and the other guy says the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's super interesting. Okay, cool. And as you guys were growing and scaling, earlier we were talking about the employees with the management. You found your right guys. You found the guys that buy into the vision, that are ride or die. They're like, all right, let's go. We're okay with not getting salaries for now, right? What was your policy with HR? Like, were you guys like a hire quick, fire faster type of business, or how did you approach that? Because HR is such a big thing as you grow in this space. And especially when you're scaling, you want people to come in, they get it quick, throw them in the ring, they know how to fight. you
Yeah,
know?
I agree with you. I mean, for me, I think that was one of the very difficult thing, especially in Dubai at the time. Now I think probably things have changed, but at the time it was a very small ecosystem in the idea of, the startup ecosystem and mentality in Dubai. So you didn't have people coming to interviews and going, it wasn't Silicon Valley to go like, I get it. I see what you guys are doing. Yeah, where do I work? And to have a line of people outside the door being like, I want to work in a startup. So most of the people that used to come, they used to come from multinationals or like, steady jobs. And it was very hard because we had to educate them and be like, you might have a smaller salary, but this is what you're working for. And you have to stay beyond 6 o'clock because you have to do this project and you don't have to ask me for overpay and I don't know what. So it was very hard to educate them and it was a big problem. What happened is that the way we built the founding team and the core, with maybe one or two exceptions, it was basically your connections, So I was friends with John, and that's how we were working before. Then my wife now, which was at the time my friend from AUD as well, she joined to help us on some design stuff, and she managed to end up being there and build the whole department and stuff like that. So I think part of the founding team, I think like around 6 of us, we were like kind of friends of friends or someone knew each other. So that's kind of how you build a startup at the beginning, is through connections. And then we started going in the market. Like one person actually came from a supermarket. I think 1 or 2 people from AUD, we went to try to pitch to students and stuff like that. But it was very, very hard and a lot of hard work in terms of awareness and try to pitch to them the idea that, okay, this is a startup.
Yeah. Yeah, it took some time, I think. The market's a lot more mature now than where it was before, but I've noticed there's still some challenges to it. I want to get into, we don't have a lot of time. I want to still make sure we're leaving time for coming down to the exit, how these decisions were made. As you guys were growing, were you hoping to exit or were you hoping for IPO, or where were your heads at? If you could take us back to that time right before you got to that conversations.
I think if you ask every person in the management team, maybe they'll have a different answer. For me, I was looking at an exit, not an IPO, but there was also some personal reason of like wanting to leave Dubai, and I had the kid, and I want to focus more on family. So an exit was easier for me to kind of exit the project than to exit just like that and then hope that there will be an IPO at one point. But I think when the discussions with Delivery Hero were happening is that, and because of the pandemic, we realized that, okay, this is a good opportunity. There was a lot of back and forth within the management team of understanding, do we take this deal or do we continue going? Because obviously by then we were confident enough, because also someone so big came from outside to validate who we are and be like, okay, you guys are doing great. So that's,
you got the tap on the shoulder.
That's one of the best validation. Yeah. And we were kind of, on top of our game, because we reached to a level that we knew what we were doing. We knew how to do it. It's been 5.5 years. So we're like, should we just take this globally? Should we continue doing this? Well, I think it was a combination of, there was a bit of fatigue in the founding team, because it was like around 3.5 years of working 7 days a week, then working maybe 6 days a week the next 2 years. So it was a combination of like, we made it this far, should we just, take the exit? So in the end, that was the decision, let's go with the exit. And it was the pandemic, there was a lot going on. So
I was about to ask, when was that in relation to the pandemic?
For us, the pandemic actually helped us. I mean, obviously it was a disaster what happened globally, and hopefully it will not happen, or we will handle it better as humanity next time. But business-wise for us, it helped us because we started negotiation with Delivery Hero like probably end of 2019, like before it was obvious that this is a pandemic. It was just news. And then we sold the company in August 2020. So like kind of in the middle of like everyone should be at home, everyone order online, don't go to the supermarkets and stuff like that. And in those kind of 12 months, I think we tripled in numbers, and we were already big by then. And that helped us because we started from lower valuation at the end of 2019 and we ended up all the way to 360 in August 2020. So for us, that helped us. I mean, it was very hectic business-wise and stuff like that, but we were set in a way that we were ready to scale to that level, and we did it.
All right. Well, that's amazing, man. I mean, congrats on that. So from the moment you guys decided, hey, you know what? All right, let's sell, to actually locking things in, what was that environment like? I'm sure there's a whole other journey of due diligence happening here. How did you guys get to that valuation that you've locked in? Was it 300, 350
It was
mil?
360, yeah.
$360 million, yeah.
Sorry, what was the question? Because
No.
I
So
was coughing in.
when all good, bro. So between that time, from when you decided, okay, cool, we're happy, let's exit, let's sell it off to Delivery Hero, and I mean, obviously due diligence. How did you guys come to an agreement on that price point? I'm sure there's a lot of negotiations back and forth, but how was that valuation made? How did you guys get to agree on that price?
I mean, it was more kind of starting the conversation. Let's say if we take it in a more holistic approach, was like understanding, do we match as companies? Like, does it make sense for you to buy us, and does it make sense for us to sell to you? That was kind of the first, is it a yes or no? After we passed okay, this is a yes, then we went into more where we are at and what's our valuation, and that was, let's say, many months before we started the company, and that's where we kind of set the valuation, which was not this. And then it moved into kind of due diligence and legal and, okay, let's set up the agreements and stuff, which took, I think, around plus minus 6 months, that. And then in that process of the 6 months, every other month, we used to come back to the valuation, because the valuation was based on a mathematical formula based on the revenue or, parameters from the business. And then we used to come back and be like, look, we grew 3 times. So if we change the number here, the valuation doesn't make sense anymore. It's much bigger. And then by the time we finalized everything, the mathematical formula equaled 360 million. So then they had to be okay with it, because we were just growing. So that was good for us, and I don't know if good for them. Hopefully it was good for them as well.
No, it sounds like it worked in your favor and theirs.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, and after part of the sale, usually there's other negotiations that are not necessarily financially part of the discussion. So, for example, sometimes they're like, oh, you guys got to stick around, or CEOs got to stick around for X number of years for handovers or whatever. Were there any other stipulations, or was there a stipulation like that? And were there any other set requests that they wanted from you guys, other than, here's some cash, thanks to the business?
Yeah. I mean, that's I think their standard. I don't know. I didn't go through like 6 exits to tell you if it's a standard in the market, but from what I asked around, it is a standard for the founding team at least to stay, because basically you buy the knowledge of the company. Obviously, you buy the customer and the systems and everything and the brand and stuff like that. But if the next day the founding team leaves, it will be like, okay, what do we do? How do we use the systems and stuff like that? So
Yeah.
there has to be a transition, and that's what happened in Instashop as well. There was a transition, and the founder and everyone had to stay longer. I took a decision that I wanted to leave at the exit, and that came with a certain comma that I had to apply on my agreement. But it was my decision that I wanted to leave at that time anyways, the company, and it happened
You
that we
forgo
also
certain
sold.
benefits if you exit at the time of the sale.
Usually, yeah, and usually there are financial benefits if you want to leave earlier, and those are usually put there obviously to try to incentivize the team to stay longer. So it was my decision to leave at the time, and yeah.
Alrighty. Interesting question came in from Christelle. As an investor yourself, what do you advise a startup that launched on the best way to approach an angel investor? 1, is revenue a must, or is it traction from free users still attractive?
I would answer this question in a more generic way, that for me it's about proving the business model. So obviously for each business that is different. If you're selling a hat, then yeah, maybe it makes sense to have some revenue, because you have to show that someone's willing to pay for the hat. But if you're selling a certain type of, freemium model and stuff like that, it might be hard for you to monetize at the beginning. So it's not about the revenue, but it's about showing that you're actually fixing a need in the market and that you have an existing business model.
Yeah.
That should be enough to kind of get angel investors at least interested in looking into it, And then besides that is obviously a bit the plan, what you want to do, the industry, the team, the founder for me is very important and stuff like that. So yeah, it's all
person
about
or the people that started it.
yeah. For me, it's all about proving as fast as you can and as cheap as you can the the MVP and the business model. So with the money and resources that you have as a founder, try to prove that, hey, look, this works. Whatever that means. Like, look, I have 50 subscription, I have 50 people using it, I have 50 people paying for it. Whatever it means for your specific business, you have to prove that it works. That's the most important.
All right, there we go. And looking back with 2020 hindsight vision from where you are today, your entire journey with tech and startups, and eventually exiting and now being a VC, what would you have done different?
Yeah, good question. I mean, one of the things that it was a bit of a mistake, and I would have done different was at the beginning of the journey, we went a lot on like trust on each other, the founders and the founding team and things like that. And that ended up being a bit of a problem later on. So I think it's very important at the beginning that things are clear in terms of, who is responsible for what, who owns what, and things like that. All the legal stuff to be quite defined early on, because later on you end up working a lot, being very hectic and stuff like that, and things can change. So
Yeah.
you need to. That's one thing that I would have done maybe a bit different. And what else would I have done different? I don't know. I mean, everything else, it was hectic and worked a lot, but I don't think I would have changed anything. I mean,
Yeah.
at one point I was so happy with the project that I remember thinking that, even if the company dies tomorrow, and that was after 2 or 3 years, like I wasn't thinking of what we are worth, because we had no idea what we were worth, in a way, besides the valuations internally we did with the investors. I was very happy with the learning. So I was there for the learning, and I was like, I got so much learning that even if this fails, I can go and take it and apply it to something else, and that make it successful. Obviously, I was at an age I was very young. I didn't have a family and kids to feed, and I was like, whatever, I can sleep in the car
Yeah.
if needed. So that helps, obviously, if you don't have the pressure
No,
of two
sure.
kids to feed or whatever. So yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, so now with kids and the house and everything, would you do it all over again?
That's a very good question. I don't think I would be able to do it at the same level, because working 7 days a week, it's impossible to do with a partner and with kids and stuff like that, because that means you will take from the other side, and either it will break those relationships, or it will break you because you want to be in two places in the same time. So yeah, I wouldn't do it the same, unfortunately, and that's why I advise a lot of people that up to 30, when usually people start, getting married and having kids and whatever, that's when you should put it all out, risk, work in startups, be a founder, fail, do whatever you want. Don't care about, money, because in those 10 years of your professional career, it's more about the knowledge than the money. When you're 30, if you have great knowledge, then yeah, you're going to scale and you're going to grow exponentially in terms of salaries and managerial roles and whatever. So that's one advice I
Yeah.
will have for anyone under 30 listening to us.
You know what's funny? I kind of in some ways had a similar trajectory to what you're doing, but not completely in the sense, especially the early days. Like I joined the corporate game after graduation, I guess, like everybody else. And there was a point where I knew in my career where I'm not doing this for long. Like I'm about to quit. I need to figure out certain things about how a business runs. So like I was a strategist. So my position is we're paid to be like we're glorified, you know, we're paid for our opinion in some form or the other. And I made it a point to befriend everybody. Like I'd hang out with the finance team and get to understand how to do finance for an accountant for a business. And then I'd hang out with these different groups, right? I'd hang out with HR, legal, like just so I can, and I didn't know what I was doing. Other than I'm not going to be here for long, I need to understand all the system. And I was 28 at the time where I was like, all right, bro, bet it's either now or never. Like I'm about to make director, money's gonna be good, you know? So I was like, you know what? If I don't leave now, I'm never gonna leave. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm out. I gotta get ready for this one. But
Oh,
that's
that's
awesome,
awesome.
dude.
That's awesome. Yeah, great
No,
story.
man. I love that for you, and I'm a big fan of the journey, how far you've come, and where else you're headed. What is next? What are
Thank
you
you so
super
much.
excited about in this very moment that you're working on?
Well, to be honest, one thing I realized that sometimes we get stuck so much in the idea of like talking professional, professional, professional in business. That I realized this a few months ago. People used to ask me, so what have you been doing, since you exited? And I used to kind of try to find things to say, like, yeah, I've been investing in startups and I'm in a few boards and I'm doing that. But then I realized, like, why I'm not giving the reality of things. So, like, the
Yeah.
past 3 years for me, I've been basically a chief dad's officer. So, like,
I love
so
that.
I've been changing diapers and spending time with my kids and stuff like that. Let's say in a matter of like kind of 70% of my time, and the other 30% obviously investing and looking at startups. So for me, what's next? Obviously, that period also becomes secondary because the kids end up in schools and systems, and then you end up seeing them when they're 18 or when they get married if they invite you. So yeah, for me next right now is I really like the idea of like kind of trying to help startups, not necessarily also as an angel investor, but with the experience that I was in and anything that I can help them with. So I'm kind of actively being part of like different boards of different startups and try to advise them
Mm. At
and things like that.
advisory
So that's,
capacity.
yeah, as much as I can and as much as time allows it. So that's one thing that I do quite actively. The second one is that I do have a lot of ideas myself, but I don't know if right now I'm not ready to be a founder, because I know what that entitles and I know how much time and work I have to put into it, and I don't know if I'm willing to do that.
Mm.
But I really like the idea of, like, it's called a startup studio, where you kind of create a team of very good talent that can manage launching different startups, and then obviously each
Nice.
startup has its own founder.
Hmm.
So that's something I'm kind of looking into it, not actively, but I'm discussing with a few people. Um, yeah, and besides that, a few other things, but these are the ones that are worth mentioning.
Dude, I love that, man. You're keeping yourself busy. That's
Yeah,
super
yeah,
cool. All right, well, shout out to CDO, Chief Dad Officer. I think that you should get a shirt with that on.
yeah. I will, I will.
That's
Unfortunately,
awesome.
yeah.
All right, man. No, but for Cosmin, thank you so much for your time, bro. I really appreciate having you here. This has been such an enlightening and awesome conversation. And for everybody that has tuned live to the session, thank you all for joining us. This is Big Stories. We bring these to you every single month, brought to you by Founder Connects. Stay tuned. Check them out on LinkedIn. Visit founderconnects.com so you guys are constantly up to date on what's happening. And if you're a founder yourself, you're a VC, you'd like to get involved, reach out, join the community. We'd love to have you. And I will see you guys next month. Cosmin, appreciate it, man.
Thank
We'll
you
see you
so
in a
much,
week.
Omar, and it was very smooth, so I appreciate
My
it.
pleasure. My pleasure. Anytime.
You're awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you. All right.
We'll
Take
be
care,
in
guys.
touch.
Have
Bye.
a great week. Peace.
Bye bye.